You're listening to the Dueling Pistols podcast, where we read and discuss the stories of our past and explore some of the most wild adventures from modern history.
No one got scalped.
Yeah, it's true.
Richard Calloway, so he's a dick.
Yeah, right.
Ingalls is the last name. I can't remember if it was Mary.
Yeah, she ran 41 days escaping the Indians. They have a statue, remember? He avoids killing.
5 dudes took his daughter and 3 walked away. I mean, that wouldn't have worked with me. Showed up naked. Scalp. I don't know, man. If I got some guy yelling at me and he's wearing a wig.
It's true. Triggered by Black Flag. Welcome back to the podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and I'm joined by my brother, Brent Call. How are you, Brent?
I'm well, thank you.
All right, we are back with Daniel Boone. We're in the book Boone, a biography by Robert Morgan. We're getting deep into the story now. Okay, the book talks about how from 1770 to 1782, Boone accomplishes all the things that he's the most famous for in that 12-year window.
Okay.
So here we are. We're about to get into some of basically the next 12-year run, which is like the peak of Boone's famous exploits, right? Now, just to catch people up who might have just been jumping onto this episode, I encourage you to go back and listen to the earlier shows. But where we're at right now, just to recap, Boone's alone in Kentucky. His friend John Stewart disappeared. Later, they're almost certain they found John Stewart because they found his powder horn with a pile of bones. Had to be him. That's years from now, though. At this point, Daniel Boone actually doesn't know if he lived or died or where he is. His brother Squire was there, and he left with the furs. John Stewart's gone, and we talked about how Boone, was talking about how he would fall into a melancholy alone, how he's trying to deal with those solo hunter thoughts, basically. And he's out there hunting, trapping, and avoiding Indians. And there's a few stories of this time where he's just out there alone. There's one story that sounds pretty apocryphal, that he just kind of shot an Indian fishing on a log and he fell into the water. Which the book addresses, saying it doesn't make any sense at all.
He doesn't quite match up with everything else that's been going on.
And his
very out of character.
His son Nathan, who is his youngest son, just repeats the story as though from his father's perspective, the way his father told it. But even then, Boone doesn't actually say he shot the Indian. He just says the Indian fell into the water. He sort of implies this stuff, probably cheekily, and just leaves it at that. But it doesn't make sense. Why you'd fire, like how many other Indians would run out where there's one Indian, there's more than one kind of thing. So that came up on the last episode. But right now he has now discovered Kentucky. He's been there a couple of years. Remember Emery, Captain Emery, who is, you said you looked it up, a half white, half Native American figure who's the chief of some Shawnee, who captured them, and John basically captured the crew. And then, first they came in and they captured him and they took all their stuff. Well, Boone and John Stewart couldn't stand that, Boone especially, it seems. And so him and his cohort, partner in crime, they decide they're going to steal back the horses from the Indians. So they follow the Shawnee for a couple of days. They catch up with them, and in the night they steal their horses. They ride a day and a half full on, and then while they're resting, the Shawnee catch up to them and capture them. It's one of those early times in Boone's career where he doesn't make those sorts of mistakes more than once. He's starting to become an old buck, one that narrowly escapes the dangers that young bucks sometimes just don't. And he's living to be an older buck that's a little wiser and a little smarter, so he doesn't get caught. He got lucky. They cart him off for quite a while, and what happens? He ditches into the cane brakes with a gun. Him and John Stewart, they make a break for it. After 3 or 4 days of traveling further and further west with the Shawnee, they escape into the cane brake, which is just a giant bamboo forest from the sounds of it. And
it's weird to think that we have something that's basically bamboo in America.
Yeah.
Never thought of that.
And they break away, and they take the rifles in there. Well, the Indians kind of have to decide whether the Shawnee crew do we go in after these two guys that now have guns? And sounds like what they did was they snuck out, got away, and he bumped into his brother Squire. Then they decided to stay out for another year, basically, and hunt. And somewhere in that mix, it was Squire and Neely, Boone, and Stewart. And Neely and Squire would go out with the buddy system to trap and stuff, and Stewart and Boone would go out separately to cover more ground. And in the end, Stewart disappeared, which was devastating for Boone. I mean, this is the guy that was like, go steal horses back from Indians? Yeah, let's go do that. Like, not very many men.
Because there was like five dudes.
Yeah,
and only John's like, yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. So, and Boone talks about how reliable, what a remarkable woodsman, he's very accomplished and all that kind of stuff. So it's a devastating loss in some way for Boone. So lots happening right now, and he's missing his family, but he also feels this overwhelming urge that he has a role to fulfill, that he's been sort of divinely selected maybe for some mission, or he's supposed to fulfill something. He's out there exploring Kentucky in a way that no other European has done, or settler colonialist. So here he is, and that's where the story is starting today. It says that it appears that Boone stayed a while in a cave on Shawano Run, a tributary of the Kentucky River that summer. A tree over the entrance once had DB-1770 carved in it. Years later, the remains of campfires were found on the cave floor. It is still called Boone's Cave.
That's cool.
On the nearby Dix River, another of the legendary events of Boone's career supposedly occurred that summer. As he told it, Boone was surprised by Indians on a bluff over Dix River, less than a mile above the junction with the Kentucky River. The bank far below was covered with trees that reached up within a few feet of the bluff. Rather than surrender, Boone said he took a leap into the top of a sugar maple, and the top bent with his weight cushioning his fall as he grabbed onto an upper limb.
Oof.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than surrender, he took a leap into the top of a sugar maple, and the top bent with his weight cushioning his fall as he grabbed onto an upper limb. I do that. I've done that.
Yeah.
I've jumped off of ledges onto trees and then climbed down those trees. He then dropped from branch to branch until he reached the ground 60 feet below. On the riverbank, he ran through the thickets, then swam the stream, leaving the Indians stunned by the speed of his escape.
Just flying squirrel off a cliff. That's rad.
Ran through the thickets and then swam the stream. He put distance, man. They were like, I ain't jumping off of that. you boys want to go? No, I ain't going. It says, though Isaiah Boone, Daniel's nephew, and several scholars have expressed skepticism about the anecdote, it could be true. I don't see any skepticism in that. None. Zero. Zilch.
You have Indians chasing you down. You have plenty of motivation to make that work.
Right. Yeah.
All the motivation needed. Okay.
Yeah.
You light a fire under somebody, you can do amazing things.
When I was young, I did some crazy jumps like that, and did some. I'm known to get into some trees and do some heights. Didn't necessarily bother me the way they should have, especially in trees.
I'm curious about that. Do you attribute that to good balance?
Perhaps, but maybe it's because I climbed trees so often as a kid, so constantly. We had those thickets in Oregon we called the Monkey Mansion.
I was going to say, you're talking about the mansion.
And it was just, we would jump from tree to tree to tree in these maple thickets and alder thickets. And we would bend one tree down to
and they are so bendy. Like, I don't think people understand that these thickets
are under 20, 30 feet tall.
Yeah, but they're still under these giant other trees. And so they're kind of stunted, and they kind of trying to grow out weird.
We would build forts, hammer and nail, put 2x4s up.
You could literally start running up along a branch and jump onto another tree.
My cousin Mandy, she fell about 100 feet. From the top of a fir tree.
How many branches she hit?
She fell about 100 feet, but each each branch she hit on the way down. So it was a controlled fall somewhat. And the last 18 feet or 15 feet, there's nothing there. And I watched it and I was like, grab a damn branch, like anything.
I know. That's what I was thought. I was like, if you fell from the top of a tree, you have a couple of chances to grab something.
There was a boom, 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 smash, boom, boom. It was just like one hit after another until she hit. And maybe it wasn't from the very top. Maybe it was the last 40 feet or 30 feet. But anyway, it was a number of branches on the way down. It's a thick fir tree, till you got to the bottom. But that's the sort of stuff we did all the time. We climbed a lot of trees. So I think there was a familiarity with that. There was a lot of upper body strength, a lot of rock climbing, hanging, swinging, jumping. We just grew up that way. Organ, trees. I mean, we literally climbed anything that was our thing. We should have died, but we didn't. But yeah, I have no doubts whatsoever. I remember there were some cliffs near Abernathy Creek where we would get toward the edge of the cliff and then jump into some trees and then shimmy down those trees. Just like a kid sneaking out his bedroom window, jumping onto the tree and climbing down, whatever. So anyway, back to the book. It says that, as a boy, Boone had probably climbed and learned to ride a bending treetop, drop from limb to the ground and drop. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what we did too. We did that quite often. With practice, an agile boy could reach the ground in seconds from the top of the tallest trees, breaking his fall by grasping one limb and swinging to the next all the way to the forest floor. That's all we did out there was that. And in the end, when I built a tree house, which is, on the low end, it's 25 feet off the ground. On the high end, it has a good 50-foot drop pretty quick. You're 100 feet up. The trees that I built it in, 100 feet tall. I'm climbing to the top of that fir tree and I topped it, bit by bit. And, so basically I took a chainsaw up there and, just did it. Cut the top 20 feet off. All that stuff with ropes and climbing trees and all of that. That's nature. Natural. It doesn't seem outlandish to me in one little bit, but it says, Boone's solitary wanderings seemed to make him more alert, more vigorous, more certain of his purpose. To many, it would have been the means of weakening the mind, but in Boone, it only seems to have renewed his energies. The biographer Bogart says, in the 3 months that no response awaited the word, he learned how much the thought could speak.
He's saying because he didn't talk for so long, his thoughts got so loud.
Yeah, in 3 months when he had no one to talk to, he learned how much his mind could keep him entertained, could speak. In the account Filson gives of this summer, Boone sleeps in canebrakes and thickets, fearing Indians are watching his camps. Wolves howl in the night and circle, ignoring fear. He luxuriates in the solitude and plenty of the forest. It is his definitive period when his truest and best self emerges and clarifies its essential nature. For 3 months he was alone, William Carlos Williams says. Surely he must have known that it was the great ecstatic moment of his life's affirmation. Like Alexander Selkirk, the sailor, who was the model for Robinson Crusoe before him, Boone may have seen deep truths about himself revealed through the cleansing simplicity of the demands of survival. On July 27th, 1770, Squire Boone returned to Kentucky with the money from the furs. Squire had paid some of Boone's debts, and he had bought new supplies. So, 3-4 months later, Squire Boone returns, and he comes back with the supplies. He paid off some debts, got rid of sold their bounty, and they're back for more. Now, as far as him being alone during that time, I mentioned this on the last episode, I think. There is something cathartic about, hunting alone, just being alone for weeks and weeks at a time in a wild place. You definitely learn to still your thoughts. You have a lot of time to think. There's a serenity that comes from it. I recommend everyone do it. Just unplugging from civilization is one thing, but it's another thing to go out into the wilderness and be alone on top of it without another companion there. It truly changes a human.
I don't think most people have spent that much time alone.
No.
It's very rare for a human being to spend days alone ever in their life.
Well, in our modern decadent world that we live in, for sure. So it says that he had assured Rebecca that Boone was well and thriving and would return after another trapping season. Squire may well have brought Boone a message from Richard Henderson with the additional supplies. Each brother had achieved success in a separate mission. For safety, the brothers moved to a cave near the mouth of Marble Creek on the Kentucky River. Here they lived for 2 months, then moved to another cave farther down the river near the mouth of the Hickman Creek. Boone carved his initials on the walls of each of these caves, and a nearby bluff was called Boone's Knob. But for safety and convenience in their hunting, Boone and Squire kept moving. To avoid detection, they stayed in no camp for very long. Once, returning from a hunt, they found their camp had been raided and many supplies stolen. Blankets, moccasins, leggings were missing. Even the kettle had disappeared. Finding wolf tracks, they followed them to a den under a blown-down tree where wolf cubs slept on the remains of one of their blankets. They killed the mother wolf, recovered the kettle she had stolen, and tried to tame the cubs as pets, but without success.
Did you just read an excerpt out of the Jungle Book? What the hell are you talking about?
Mowgli.
Hold on. So the wolf jacked their shiz. They murdered her for it, which,
Yep.
And then they're like, let's train some puppies. And then they're bad at training dogs.
You summed
wolves.
it up, yeah. The invaders seem to be wolves, yes.
Okay, that came out of left field. I was waiting for Indians, other settlers. I was actually thinking maybe a bear, but I didn't think a wolf would have stole a kettle. What was in the kettle?
Probably a little bit of
little bit of something.
Something, yeah.
A little something.
That's crazy, huh? At the end of the deer...
You know how mad you would be?
At the end of the deer season, the brothers packed up the hides for Squire to take back to the settlements. It had been a good year. Again, Boone was alone in the wilderness for many weeks, but heavy rains delayed Squire's return from North Carolina, Yadkin. Impatient and worried, Boone set out to meet his brother. On the way, he encountered an old Indian man left in the woods to die. Boone gave him most of the meat of a deer he had killed. Hurrying ahead, Boone spied what appeared to be a tree on fire. Approaching warily, he discovered to his relief it was the camp of the returning squire who had brought with him additional supplies as well as pack horses.
He lit a tree? Or is there fire by a tree? Did I misread that?
It looks like he lit a tree on fire.
Hey, over here.
Lampers and I do that all the time.
Really?
Dead trees.
Yeah. What for? Eat?
I mean, yeah.
It's cold.
There'll be a dead snag, that's just standing there. It's winter. You're not going to start a wildfire. Yeah, we'll just start a fire at the base of a 20-foot snag or something, or if it's fallen over and we just light the whole tree on fire. There's no need to search for firewood. Just finish the tree.
Crazy.
It's already burnt half the time.
Huh.
So yeah, we just get a fire going at the base of it, and then it turns into a giant bonfire, and we just enjoy it. And then it burns out. It takes 2 or 3 days to burn out, and then it burns out.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of weird when at night, you can see the light just
popping off
from the fire. Yeah.
That's trippy.
It doesn't seem to affect the deer hunting much or anything like that.
Really?
Elk, maybe, I don't know. But for deer, if they're far enough away, I don't think they associate that with humans necessarily. I think there's more fire out there that, I don't know. I just know that it hasn't been a major factor. So yeah, he found an Indian, Brent, just in the woods, an old man in the woods left to die.
Why?
It doesn't say. It says Boone gave him most of the meat of the deer he had killed.
Was the dude some kind of a dick? Like, who leaves an old man? Just an old man? Or does it say was it male or female?
It says an old man. Yeah.
Does it say what tribe?
Maybe they were like, your useful purpose is over. Walk away and end it all. I don't know. It has been suggested that people of genius do their work in a decade's time. You hear that? It has been suggested that people of genius do their work in a decade's time. For mathematicians and physicists, the decade is often their 20s. For poets and composers, the best years are usually their 30s. For others, the glory period may come later. But in each case, their lives lead up to the 10 years of inspiration and greatness, peak, and then trail away into years of more ordinary achievement. Examples cited are romantic poets such as Wordsworth and Coleridge, who had their years of towering accomplishment from 1798 to 1808. Or Walt Whitman, who wrote most of his best work between 1854 and 1865. Emerson did almost all of his great writing between about 1835 and 1846. Though Daniel Boone was a frontiersman and explorer, not an artist of words, he embodied and enacts many of the qualities and ideas romantic writers such as Emerson, Thoreau, and Whitman would later articulate. It is hard not to think of Boone when we read Emerson on solitude. Quote, "But if a man would be alone, let him look at the stars," or Thoreau on walking in wildness. The self-reliance, the intense curiosity, and relish of experience of Whitman's Song of Myself, the peaceableness and love of the wild suggest Boone more than any other single historical person. Whitman also came from a family of Quakers. Boone was a great romantic artist, but his work of art was his life, his example of attention, exhilaration, and contemplation. Prayer is the contemplation of the facts of life from the highest point of view, Emerson said, echoing the spirit of the scout and explorer. 50 years after Boone explored Kentucky and relished its wildness for 2 years without returning to the settlements, the Hudson River painters captured something of his transcendental view of the mountains and rivers in their art. Boone saw nature as both fact and fable, and every cloud and sunset, tree and blade of grass as instance of both the real and the ideal, physical and spiritual. Everyone who ever interviewed him mentioned his calm and his poise. The sense of the spiritual was something he shared with the Indians and likely learned in part from them. Every tree and river, rock and cloud was alive, haunted, and significant. After Boone would come many other great naturalists and artists, but none of them would have the legendary status of Boone, the heir of the original. None had so much influence or inspired so many who came after. Like Washington and like Lincoln later, Boone inspired the craving for an ideal self. With Quaker tolerance for others, reliant and integrous, with a large capacity of wonder for reaching out toward the new and mysterious, brave but cautious, sociable, diplomatic, calm in the face of danger, a lover of song and reading, a notoriously erratic speller. Daniel Boone did most of the things for which he is remembered between about 1770 and 1782. He lived until 1820 and was a legend for the last 36 years of his life. But the legend is based almost entirely on the events of those 11 or 12 years. Crazy.
That's crazy.
You know, you think of some musicians, people that produce some extremely creative works, like let's say Tolkien or something, or C.S. Lewis. And I'm really amazed by those that manage to produce a high level of
quality and quantity.
Yeah, a high level of artistic output for extended periods of time. Like
Brandon Sanderson. That man needs to slow down. He wrote 5 books in secret last year during COVID.
Yeah,
2 years ago during
that's
COVID.
what I mean. Like there are people who do have this ability, even like rock stars, that are 30 years they have a run time. When a lot of rock stars last 10, and that's it.
It's true.
You know, they literally, like some of your favorite bands, they have the same album and they never came out with new. Like they had their stroke of brilliance in that 8, 9, 10 year window. And after that, it was gone.
But then Kiss.
But then you have those bands that go for 40 years, 70 years, always creating, not 70, but 50 years, that just always creating new stuff and evolving and adapting with the times. But no doubt there's going to be a peak in there at some point for sure. But still, there are those who are able to just do it their whole life. That's amazing to me. So anyway, we're in that period right now. This is 1771. So this is the period of his his most famous exploits. The next 12 years, and what we're about to go into is where he really becomes the Daniel Boone we all know. So during this time, there's a lot of people that are discovering Kentucky now. They're starting to move over, come through the gap, explore areas. It's not just Boone that's going on, that's in 69, 70, yes, but then 71, 72, 70, you start having others sort of following in his footsteps. And it says, George Washington, who owned tracts of land west of the Alleghenies, made another expedition down the Ohio River in 1769 through 1770, getting as far as the mouth of the Kanawha in future West Virginia and the Levisea Fork of the Big Sandy in Kentucky. From journals kept during the journey, it is clear that he foresaw trouble between the Indians and settlers who were already making their way from Fort Pitt down into the Ohio Valley. Washington looked west to the land beyond the Alleghenies as the great prize worth fighting for. And although he did not know at the time the rewards he received for his soldiering in form of land grants in the Ohio country would become the lifetime foundation of his personal wealth. Remember, the war hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. How did he make his money again? Was it just all by trapping and trading and stuff? Like he didn't strike
Washington?
it rich.
Or Boone?
Boone
never makes money.
He just stays poor forever.
Boone makes money and then it goes away.
You know what? I relate with this guy
more
and
it goes away. He doesn't care about money.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't care about money. And you'll see it more and more all the time. Like he gets giant tracts of land but he doesn't fight for it. He'll just leave it and go find more land, and just move.
And I'm sure that's attitude is what saved him with those Indians plenty of times. Nah, you can have my rifle. Nah, you can take my knife.
Yeah, but we're about to get into a story where one day he just decides he doesn't want to give up his rifle on this particular occasion.
Oh,
it doesn't end so well for him. So we'll get into that. But George Washington, serves in the military. He helps in the Revolutionary War, Valley Forge, crossing the Delaware, beating back the British Empire, right? He does the impossible. And as a result of that, he's granted massive lands, which then become the foundation of his wealth for the rest of his life. But right now, he's just kind of exploring these regions. He doesn't know that these areas he's exploring, he'll get to own down the road.
That's cool.
And so it says, this country would become the lifetime foundation of his personal wealth. Washington, like many others, seemed to have an obsession with the West. Ellis points out that this interest even affected the way he remodeled his house. When Washington renovated Mount Vernon, he rebuilt the mansion so its main entrance faced west. Mm. During the 1770-71 winter, Caspar Mansker and several companions were hunting away from the larger group in the region of the Green River, and they heard a very odd sound. So this is just another explorer kind of out in this area. So 71, think of this as 1771. So that would mean Squire or Daniel, and they're just out there doing their thing too in the area. The book says it seemed neither animal nor Indian what they heard. Mansker told others to stay hidden while he went to investigate. Moving from tree to bush, the way he might approach a deer or Indian camp, the hunter saw a sight that astonished and then made him laugh. Lying on his back on a deerskin in a little clearing, a bare-headed man was singing to the sky. It was Daniel Boone, alone in the forest, indulging his love of song and craving a human voice, even if it was his own.
What was he singing? Did they say?
This image of Boone, assuming he was alone, singing in the wilderness, has a resonance that early became part of the legend. It is said that he sang hymns, like he is a Quaker. Mm-hmm. So they're likely, English hymns, mm-hmm. Scottish, Irish, type church hymns. It says many woodsmen were fond of singing, but it is the story of Boone that has come down to us. Though surrounded by forests where Indians and wolves and panthers might be prowling, not to mention rival hunters, he is so at ease he lies on his back and sings to the clouds and trees and passing birds. He sings for the sheer joy of hearing a voice. But why would a man trying to avoid detection by Indians lie in the woods singing at the top of his voice? Boone knew his life and his mission depended on his ability to fade through the forest without being seen. It seems likely he had already spotted Caspar Mansker and the Long Hunters, had them under his surveillance, perhaps for days, monitoring their wandering, and as they approached, he put on a show for them. Lying on his back and singing as they got close, he created another never-to-be-forgotten image of his legend, which we are still talking about today. He knows how to get noticed.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a crazy story for you we're going to get into. Remember our fellow Neely?
Mm-hmm. The guy that went back?
Yeah, who's Neely again? I'm Alexander Neely.
I don't remember his backstory. I just remember he was one of the guys that were with him when they got caught by the Shawnee the first time.
Wrong.
No? Who was he then?
Neely was the guy that came with Squire.
The buddy system guy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Was Neely not with them before that?
Nope, neither was Squire.
Okay.
So that crew was there for a year or more.
Okay.
Right? Trapping and all that. When Emery comes along.
Snatches him.
And snatches him, the Shawnee chief. And they steal back the horses and then they flee. Well, when they flee, remember, they get back to camp and everybody they were with had already kind of left, but they caught up with them. And then as the entire group was heading back to Kentucky, Squire and Neely show up with fresh supplies. And so Squire's like, or Boone and Stewart are like, dope. Let's go back. No need to go all the way to Kentucky. Let's get this trapping thing started up again.
Right after he pissed off
the Indians.
Like
right after he
save yourself a 2-week trip to Kentucky and back
or more. I mean, so he goes back this time, and that's when Squire and all those guys hunt and all that. And what happens? Stewart disappears, and then Squire and Neely leave, and so Boone is alone. So fast forward. In March of 1771, Daniel and Squire loaded their furs and hides on the pack horses Squire had brought from North Carolina. Remember, he's caught back up. His brother showed back up. And I paid our bills, paid some of your bills, and here's all the supplies, and they stayed and trapped together. Well, they're loaded up. It's 1771, March, and they're heading back to North Carolina. It took them several weeks searching for the best trails and canebrakes and thickets, the best fords across rivers and rain-swollen creeks to reach Powell's Valley. While camped there and hunting for meat, Squire encountered a startling apparition of a man, gaunt, in torn clothing, dirty, wandering without direction. It was his old friend, Alexander Neely.
How long has it been since he's seen him?
Probably a year.
And he just walks out of the wood looking skeleton. That's...
Neely had come with a hunting party back to the region around the Cumberland Gap and got lost. He
didn't have a buddy.
He had fired all his powder, hoping his shots would be heard and he would be rescued. So let's talk about that a little bit. There's that saying, generally panic is what kills you.
Yeah, there's lots of other ways to notify people about your existence rather than shooting all your ammo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not smart.
But people panic. He got out there and he got separated from the group somehow. And in that moment, his thought was, fire the gun, get rescued. It's this short term, I got to get rescued now. I got to get found now. And not being able to retrace his steps, whatever it was, he got lost and he panicked. I mean, that's in essence what this is. He wasn't calm under pressure. There's a sense of, like for Daniel or a real woodsman or someone who has gotten themselves to a certain level of confidence being in the mountains alone, that you get separated from the group and you're lost. You're like, okay, I'm lost today. I probably won't be lost in a week. I probably won't be lost in a month. Like, there's no urgency to be found because you're just fine being there now. You know how to build a shelter. You know how to have a fire. You know how to procure food. You know how many days you can go without food. You know where the water, you can get water. You're like, okay, all my needs are met. I can stay hidden. When you have enough woodcraft, enough survival ability, enough skill, like you don't you don't fire all your ammunition. Like that's, he could shoot a deer, or a buffalo or an elk or you name it. That'll feed him for weeks, if not a month or more. The last thing that you want to do is fire all those shots. And what if you need it for self-defense as well? You come on 2 Indians.
Or wolf jacks your kettle.
Yeah. So, again, panic is what kills you. Again, it's unfathomable to me at this stage to think of how, silly that is, that especially given the fact that Neely is no stranger.
That's what I'm confused about.
Being in the country. Perhaps he relied a lot on others around him or on gear that he felt like he had and not enough woodcraft. There are people who spend some time out there, but they haven't really moved beyond being able to start a fire without a match, or without something to aid in it. How many people can actually build a fire from the shoelaces in their boots?
I went camping like 6 months ago with a friend of mine who had told me that they have camped plenty of times before. RV camping is not the same, Brian.
Exactly. Like, it's hard to say exactly, but panic ensued, it seems, because he fired all his shots, and then he got himself into some bigger trouble. He's starving to death. He's gaunt, skinny.
Well, the thing is like, if you shoot that gun up into the air, there's Indians around too. Like, they're just as likely to find you.
Yeah, but presumably he got separated from his group, but not terribly far, and then he panicked. When I was younger, I got lost a couple of times. Well, probably 10 times. I mean, I got lost quite a bit. And a few times early on when it first happened, I got spooked. I mean, I got really worried because I really didn't know what I was doing. I had reason to be concerned. Fast forward to today, and I don't need to worry. Like, if I get lost, I don't care. Like, I'll just live out there for a week or 2 weeks if I have to. And by the time I find a river and follow it out, or some kind of land feature, or climb to the top of a peak and get my bearings, like, I know I'm going to find my way at some point. I'm not lost. You can always move east. If you're him, you can find the Appalachian Range, and you should be able to find the gap.
He had lots of options.
There was things going on, but anyway,
smoke signals.
Anyway, panic ensued because here he is, and he lost. He fired all his power. So it says he had fired all his powder, hoping his shots would be heard and he would be rescued, but no one heard him, and he had wandered helpless, without powder, almost starving. One day, while he was sitting weak and in despair, a dog appeared and came near him, as if pleased to find a human in the woods. Grabbing the dog by the neck, he cut its throat with his hunting knife and started a fire with the flint of his gun to cook the dog's carcass. Jerking most of the meat, he packed it in a sack made of the dog's skin and started out again to find his way.
I would have done the same, but that dog is not out there in the woods by accident.
Maybe he belonged to some Indians.
Here's the thing. My money is he stumbles upon somebody and they're like, that fur looks familiar. They
just killed Jake.
Could you imagine some rando walking up with your dog skin and all the meat inside of it?
Skippy.
Ooh.
Yeah. So
Fido.
Here we go. So, I mean, just a wild story, right? So it says that he was definitely capable, right?
Yeah, if the animal walks up and puts his head in his hand, he's very capable.
He slit its throat, skinned it, made a bag out of its skin, and jerked all the meat and put all the meat in that bag. And he made the fire with the flint of his rifle. So,
he's a capable human.
He has the flint, has the spark. He has what he needs to make fire, and he's got a knife still. And, so the man is not without skill, and yet he's wandering around starving to death. The navigation skills are weak, and perhaps some of the panic skills. By this point, the panic may have settled, and then he was thinking more clearly, but by then he had already blown his powder.
Yeah, I'm sure after he shot all the powder, like, it came sinking home real quick.
Yeah.
That's going to shock some sober into you.
Squire told Neely he could join the Boones at their camp, but he must eat sparingly, being semi-starved for so long. So he's like, come join us, but you could die if you try to eat too much because you're so gaunt. Neely threw away the residue of his dog meat, which Squire saw was infested with maggots. Daniel and Squire nursed him in their camp until he regained his strength. So he didn't jerk the meat very well.
That's when you think, oh, this guy is capable. Maggots.
I just don't see this happening to Daniel or Squire.
No.
Like, they're too capable.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere Neely missed some lessons. It says they also mended his clothing, which had been ripped and torn in his rambling. After several days, Neely was strong enough to follow after his party of long hunters. It is likely Squire and Daniel gave him detailed directions for reaching the Cumberland Gap. Years later, Squire Boone would visit Neely at his home in the New River Valley. Some people just need to stay home.
Very true.
Anxious to get home with the furs, the Boones followed the warriors' path east, nearing the westernmost settlements of Virginia. Since they had spent the winter and spring on the Cumberland, they may not have known how much war activity was going on among the Indian tribes that spring. The Iroquois were attacking the Cherokees and the Catawbas. The Shawnees and Delawares were at war with the Cherokees, and the Chickasaws were attacking the French-speaking outposts in the Illinois country. While camped in Powell's Valley and roasting some meat for supper, the Boones were accosted by a party of 6 or 8 Indians. At first, the exchange was friendly, and then the Indians offered to trade their muskets for their fine rifles. Daniel and Squire, they didn't want to give away these fine rifles, these real nice rifles. The brothers refused, and their rifles and all their furs were seized from them. One brave demanded Squire's shot pouch, and when it was not handed over, he grabbed the strap. It is not clear why Boone was so reluctant to comply with the Indian demands on this occasion. Perhaps he realized this was his last chance to return to the Yadkin with a hoard of furs after 2 years in the wilderness. It is possible Squire became angry and resistant, and Daniel was caught between his brother and the Indians. On only one other occasion years later would he lose his temper when he was surprised by Indians as he was about to eat after a long fast. Perhaps in Powell's Valley in 1771 he was aggravated by hunger. Both Boones got into scuffles with the Indians, and a large warrior raised his tomahawk and ordered them to flee, which they did. At the end of the 2 years of wandering, Boone may have been exhausted, impatient to get home. Hiding in the brush a few hundred yards away, they watched the Indians depart. Then they ran to the nearest settlement, probably a few miles away, on the Clinch River to get help. Having lost their rifles, furs, and horses, they were extremely vulnerable. A party was formed in the settlement and followed the Indians, but apparently the group was in a bad mood. One member shot a deer that wandered across their path, and the others got angry because he had given away their presents. The ensuing argument caused so much ill feeling that the band gave up the pursuit and decided to return to the settlement. Later, Boone learned that the Indians had been waiting for them in an ambush, and it was fortunate they all turned back when they did.
A little bit of providence right there.
Mm-hmm.
So, Hangry Boone doesn't make good decisions.
Apparently not.
Because it doesn't say that he loses his temper one other time after a long day before breaking your fast. Okay, I get that, bro. I'm a hangry fella.
It says, wild though, like, of all the smooth interactions he has with Indians, this is not one of them. And he's so pissed off, he goes back to the settlements, grabs a posse, and tries to run these sons of guns down to take his stuff back. I suppose it was just one Indian injustice too much. You know, they had gotten almost all the way back.
They lost a year already.
They lost a year with
and now
Emory,
another year.
And now another, yeah.
That's too much, bro. And not only that, but he's got his bills back home. Collectors are coming.
It says, as they were returning to their homes, some members of the posse killed 2 Indians near a remote cabin and divided their belongings among the group. Later, they learned some of the war party that had robbed the Boones were drowned crossing a river in a flood. It was a week of mindless brutality and loss, and a sad ending to the 2 most significant years of Boone's life.
That's fine. It's all up from here. That's what I hear.
So a couple of those Indians that robbed him, they died crossing a river. And the posse just killed 2 Indians near a remote cabin. They have no idea who those Indians were or what they were doing.
Just caught in the crossfire.
They just killed them because they were mad at some Indians. Mm. Hey, you're an Indian.
Boom.
So he comes back after those 2 years of John Stewart's dead or gone. You know, he's gone through a couple of years of just hard exploring and hunting and all that kind of stuff. And now, everything he came back with, his riches and his spoils, got stolen and taken at the last, including his rifles and all their supplies and their horses and everything they had. So, yeah, he's a little upset. There is a section right here I want to get into that kind of gives us some context for the time. Okay? The section, it's just a little 2-page section that the book occasionally brings forth to sort of give you more background, more understanding of the time frame. This section is called Regulators. It says, the events that came to be known as the Regulator movement had a dramatic impact on the region and on Boone. Increased taxes imposed in the 1760s by the colonial government on the people of North Carolina brought on the Regulator actions. When the elegant governor's palace was built around 1768, a new poll tax was introduced to pay for it, which led to increased agitation. Remember, these people are basically part of the British Empire, in essence. Mm-hmm. It was a class conflict between the eastern planters who employed slave labor and the settlers farther west who worked their own farms. Corruption was rampant at all levels of colonial administration in North Carolina. Fees for the same service, collected 2 or 3 times under different names, often never reached the capital in New Bern. The Regulator movement organized the growing alienation of the settlers from the crown. Those in the Piedmont got angry enough to defy the king and his representatives. The movement was the seedbed of the revolution, though a breakaway from the monarchy was still inconceivable to almost everyone in 1769. The most hated official of the colonial government was Edmund Fanning, Orange County Registrar of Deeds, Judge of the Superior Court, Colonel of the Militia, and member of the North Carolina Assembly. He was arrogant and came to represent everything the Regulators despised. He's the rich upper class that works under the British Empire, telling everybody how to live. It sounds like he had all the power as well. Like, he basically said who gets a deed, who's the judge of the Superior Court, he's the colonel of the... He's in charge of everything.
Sounds like a turd with a big white wig.
But the new governor's palace tax was the final straw. So he's just building a rich place for himself.
A palace tax?
Fat. And then he's just going to charge everyone around him that's in the local community to pay for it. Regulators stated their demands. 1, no more taxes until it was proved the new levies were legal. No fees larger than those required by law. The right to meet as regulators. The right to collect money for the movement's expenses. Agreement to abide by the decision of the majority.
That's a lot. Those are some demands.
Well, I mean, it's freedom. They're basically saying, let's make sure these taxes that you're asking for actually have some validity to them, that they're legal to ask. Like,
not just your whim.
There's English common law that should be followed here. It says no fees larger than those required by the law. So you can't just give us arbitrary fees for things that we're like, we want a deed or we want this done. You can't just ask for fees on fees on fees. And the right to meet, basically, the detractors have a right to gather, and the right to collect money for the group, so they can work as a coordinated picture, almost in a way as like it's kind of like a union.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like a union in a way. They're getting together and they're saying, hey, us people over here, we're tired of getting stepped on by you that's in charge. We want the right to meet. We want to raise money for the union. We are all us little people are coming together to create one organized group so we have more power against the main power, right? And that they have an agreement to abide by the decision of the majority, meaning that if the people vote a certain way, in the city that, you have to do what they say. You can't just be a king. You're not a king. When the officials of Orange County took a member's horse in lieu of his unpaid taxes, a band of regulators rode to Hillsborough, fired into Edmund Fanning's mansion, and recovered the horse.
Good.
Fanning arrested 2 rebel leaders, William Butler and Herman Husband. The arrests incited so much anger that 700 people converged on the jail and they set them free. Yeah, you think 700 people saying let them out, and you're just the sheriff? Yeah, I think you're gonna just let them out.
Yeah, you don't got enough powder, bro.
Alarmed, Governor William Tyrone warned local officials against taking illegal fees. The regulators answered by charging Edmund Fanning with corruption. The governor called out a militia of almost 1,500 men to occupy Hillsborough and keep the peace while Butler and Husband were tried for rioting. Fanning was tried at the same court session for extortion. So they're both accusing each other of different things, and they're both in the courtroom trying to win their case. It says Husband was acquitted. Butler and 2 others were found guilty but were pardoned by Governor Tryon. It says Fanning was convicted of corruption and extortion and resigned from the position of registrar. Yet no sentence was imposed, more evidence of the unfairness of the courts. In 1769, 4 counties elected regulators to serve in the assembly. It says, whereupon Governor Tryon dissolved the body. In September 1770, Richard Henderson, who was the rich guy who's kind of hiring Boone to do some exploring, presiding over the Superior Court in Hillsborough, was attacked by a force of 150 regulators and driven from the bench.
Wow. Why?
Rioting spread throughout Hillsborough. Innocent citizens were beaten, and Edmund Fanning's fine house was wrecked. Fanning worked for the governor. When the assembly met December 5, 1770, news came that the rebels had gathered at Cross Creek to march toward New Bern, the capital. The assembly quickly passed a bill known as the Bloody Riot Act, which in essence proclaimed martial law. It was the Bloody Riot Act that inspired the greatest number of citizens to join the regulator movement and declare Edmund Fanning an outlaw to be executed when caught. Boom. So you have people saying, we want freedom, we want independence, and this tyranny that you're imposing upon us, we're not down with. And there's a struggle going on here. When they passed this Bloody Riot Act, which basically said we can have martial law in the city to make everybody do what we want, the citizens said, hold my beer. They gathered and said, yeah, Edmund Fanning can be executed if we catch him. Colonial courts would be ignored.
Well, who's going to enforce it? There's 700 of them, right? Mm-hmm. Like, there's not just a few. It's a mob now.
Yeah, it's
like the mob is taking control.
Taking control. Yeah. Finally, in 1771, the governor ordered a special court to be held at Hillsborough. Again, he called out a militia to protect the court and keep peace in the region. Regulators, some 2,000 of them,
they're just multiplying like rabbits out there.
They gathered near Alamancy Creek and sent a letter to Governor Tryon asking for an audience. The governor agreed only if they laid down their arms. The regulators rejected that demand. After waiting an hour, the governor sent a message that he was ready to fire on them. Fire and be damned, was the regulators' retort.
I love it.
In the battle that followed, the colonial militia was outnumbered, but their superior training and equipment guaranteed victory over the ragtag crowd of regulators. Tryon offered pardon to any rebel willing to swear allegiance to the crown and colonial government. Most of those who had taken part in the rebellion conceded defeat and swore the oath. Some, however, did not take the oath. Instead, they crossed the mountains beyond the Yadkin into the valley of the Watauga River and settled at a place called Sycamore Shoals and negotiated an agreement with the Cherokee Nation to lease the land. Known as the Watauga Association, it became a model for future American republics.
That's cool. You ever messed up so bad you had 2,000 people pitch their tents outside your house?
So they were outnumbered, but they had more weapons and more experience, it looks like. And so the colonial militia the British essentially were able to
push them back.
The colonial government of the British Empire were able to push them back. So, anyway, so this is all 1770. This is 69. This is the period where John Stewart disappears. Boone is away. All this happens while he's gone. But now he's back. But that's just showing you the unrest. How right now this is still the British Empire. This is still just settlers in America. There is no America yet.
And that's the weird part for this. Like the historical thing for me is to
there is no United States.
Yeah, it's bizarre to me.
This is George Washington. This is Daniel Boone, all in the service of the king and all part of the British Empire, British common law, the British system. So they're not that. You got to keep that in perspective because they're against the French and the Spanish and so on. And they're of the British Empire and they still all kind of come with this idea of being loyal to the British Empire. But it just keeps happening that their values are shifting and what they see as important and the hunger and the taste for freedom and independence, it just keeps growing and growing and growing among the capable men and women in the frontier and in America. And the British are becoming more and more disconnected with what the people there value. And they're becoming more and more dictatorial as they lose influence and power, and so hence the American Revolution comes slowly swinging into view. Remember we talked about how the 1619 project is bullshit, and so is that entire egregious rewrite of history. That's just garbage propaganda. We are now in 1772. Okay, Boone has come back from 2 years. The regulator thing happened in this window. We're slowly marching toward the Revolutionary War, which begins in roughly
1776.
That is when we declare our independence.
So is the following year 77?
We declare our independence in 1776. But it starts before that, a little bit before that, like in 1775, you could say, is that's when the war but the official declaration is 1776. But that's just us. That's just the people in the United States saying, we're now a free nation. And the French are saying, no, you're not. And here we come. So, or the British. So this, 1776 is when we declare, but we're certainly not, we still have a war to fight now. It's just getting started. Yes. So, but we're right there. We're right close to the American Revolution. This is 1772. We're about to dive into, and we're going to cover the next 2 years, 1772 to 1774. Again, this is the time that Boone, really starts to shine. Now, we know that George Washington was out there, he was 2 years older than Boone or younger? Older. 2 years older than Boone. And, Washington ends up being a military man and, fighting for the nation's independence. Boone, on the other hand, would rather be out exploring and moving west and finding new lands. And so you're going to see two incredibly historic figures, each fulfilling their destiny. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So hope you guys are enjoying the story here. If you are, support us just by sharing this with your friends, liking and subscribing to our channel. And as always, if you leave a comment in our comment section on the videos, we try to get in there and read all those comments. We appreciate that. So, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll catch you on the next one. Hello, friends. I hope you're enjoying our new Dueling Pistols podcast. Remember, it's only here temporarily on the Gritty channel.
Short time.
If you want to subscribe to the main show, head on over to our YouTube channel, Dueling Pistols, and subscribe over there. And anywhere that you get your podcast, you can subscribe there. Thanks for supporting us.
We're on all platforms.
Yeah, we're out there. Find it over there. And tell a friend.
Yeah.
Tell a friend about our new show.
Tell all your friends.
Help us grow it bigger.
We're just going to turn this to an ASMR.
All right. Thanks, guys. Catch you on the next episode.